The howl of the Wisconsin blizzard masked the sound at first. Ryan Mitchell paused, whiskey glass halfway to his lips, listening. There it was again, barely audible above the wind. A whimper. He found it at the edge of his property, a German shepherd, blood stark against pristine snow. The dog's matted coat couldn't hide the deliberate pattern of injuries. One eye swollen shut, ribs showing through torn flesh, breathing shallow. This wasn't an accident or animal attack. Someone had methodically beaten this dog and left it to die in the storm. "Jesus Christ," Ryan whispered, his military training assessing damage automatically. Internal bleeding likely. Hypothermia setting in. Minutes, not hours, remained. The dog flinched as Ryan removed his coat. A decade of isolation had taught Ryan to mind his own business, but something in the animal's remaining eye, a desperate will to live, made the decision for him. No one thought the dog would survive the night. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Ryan Mitchell's cabin stood defiant against the northern Wisconsin wilderness, much like the man himself. At 35, the former Army Ranger carried Afghanistan in the scar that bisected his left cheek and in the nightmares that made him fear sleep. 3 years since his discharge, he'd retreated to his grandfather's property, 20 acres of pine forest where the nearest neighbor was distant enough to ignore. The cabin interior reflected its owner, functional, sparse, military precise. A worn leather couch faced the stone fireplace. On the mantel, a folded flag in a triangle case and faded photographs of young men in desert camouflage, some now dead, gathered dust. Christmas decorations remained in boxes in the attic where they'd been since Grandpa Mitchell passed. The holiday season was something that happened to other people. Ryan gently laid the wounded German shepherd on a blanket near the fire. The dog's breathing came shallow and quick, each inhale seeming to cause fresh pain. One eye, the right, remained alert despite injury, tracking Ryan's movements with a mixture of terror and resignation. The left was damaged, cloudy, likely partially blind. Military instinct told Ryan the injuries were deliberate, methodical punishment rather than random cruelty. Pinewood, the town 20 miles south, boasted one stoplight, 3 churches, and a deep suspicion of outsiders. Ryan visited only for necessities. The general store run by Margaret Sullivan, a silver-haired widow who'd been a Vietnam-era combat nurse and the only person who didn't treat him like a ticking bomb. The town's veterinarian, Emily Wilson, kept to herself nearly as much as Ryan did. Rumors suggested she'd returned to her hometown after some tragedy in Chicago, but Pinewood excelled at gossip, not facts. Sheriff James Calloway patrolled the county with world-weary efficiency. A Vietnam veteran himself, he gave Ryan space but watched him carefully, the way one observes a storm that might turn dangerous. Somewhere in town, or perhaps nearby Milwaukee, was the monster who'd done this to the dog. Someone who understood inflicting pain, who'd beaten this animal and left it to die slowly in sub-zero temperatures. As Ryan filled a shallow bowl with water, he avoided the truth reflected in the German shepherd's good eye, that he recognized the systematic nature of the abuse because he'd been trained to break things too. The dog, whom Ryan found himself already thinking of as Max, though he had no idea of its actual name, represented a choice he wasn't sure he was equipped to make. Some things once broken stay that way. The needle on Ryan's truck speedometer trembled near 40, dangerous on roads rapidly disappearing under drifting snow. The German shepherd lay wrapped in blankets on the passenger seat, each bump eliciting a whimper that Ryan felt like a knife between his ribs. Pinewood Veterinary Clinic's sign emerged through the wall of white, its Christmas lights blinking weakly against the storm. "Emily!" Ryan shouldered through the door, cradling the dog. "Need help here!" Emily Wilson appeared from the back room, auburn hair twisted into a hasty bun. Her professional demeanor cracked momentarily at the sight of the bloodied bundle. "Exam room 1, she directed, already pulling on gloves. "What happened?" "Found him in the snow. Someone worked him over good and left him to die." Ryan placed the dog on the metal table with unexpected gentleness. "Can you help him?" Emily's hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking vitals, examining wounds, multiple broken ribs, malnutrition, evidence of cigarette burns, older fractures improperly healed. Her green eyes met Ryan's. "He's been systematically tortured. This wasn't a one-time beating." "Prognosis?" Ryan's voice remained military flat. "Less than 20% chance." Emily hesitated. "Initial treatment alone will be around $3,500. If there's internal bleeding or complications—" "Do it," Ryan interrupted, surprising himself. "Whatever it takes." While Emily prepped for surgery, Ryan paced the waiting room. The walls, decorated with pet photos and Christmas garland, seemed to close in. His bank account held exactly $4,782, disability pay, and odd carpentry jobs. The cabin needed a new roof come spring. Hours later, Emily emerged, exhaustion etched across her features. "He's stabilized, but critical. I found something else. A partially removed microchip. Someone tried to dig it out without anesthesia. Can you read what's left?" "Partial data only. I'll need time." Dawn broke as Ryan carried the sedated dog back through his cabin door. He'd prepared a recovery area near the fireplace. Blankets, water bowl, the old T-shirts Emily suggested for familiar scent. The dog, Ryan still mentally called him Max, remained unconscious through the transfer. By afternoon, Max had awakened, but wouldn't move from the corner where he'd dragged himself. He refused water, flinched at Ryan's approach. Eyes tracked every movement with primal fear. Ryan recognized the response, had seen it in villagers after Taliban raids, in fellow soldiers after particularly brutal firefights, had seen it in his own mirror after the ambush that killed 4 of his team. "It's okay," Ryan said, not moving closer. "Nobody's hurting you again." That night, he dreamed of the medical evacuation from Kandahar, the morphine haze, the doctor's voice. "You're going home, Ranger." The terror that followed when he realized home no longer existed. He woke to find he'd moved his sleeping bag to the floor beside Max's corner, maintaining distance but providing presence. On Christmas Eve morning, Ryan ventured into town for supplies. Margaret's general store buzzed with last-minute shoppers and whispers that died when he entered. "Heard you took in Howard Miller's vicious dog," said Tom Barnes from behind the counter. "What?" Ryan stopped mid-aisle. "German shepherd that attacked someone. Howard said he had to put it down." Margaret Sullivan appeared from the stockroom, silver hair pinned neatly beneath a red scarf. "Tom Barnes, don't you have deliveries to make?" Once he'd gone, she turned to Ryan. "Pay no mind to gossip. What do you need?" Ryan filled his basket with puppy pads, canned dog food, a soft blanket. Margaret watched with knowing eyes, adding antiseptic and gauze without being asked. "Some wounds don't show on the outside, Mr. Mitchell. You'd know that better than most." She rang up his purchases. "I'll drop by later with some things my Rufus couldn't use anymore. Good dog, Rufus. Cancer took him last spring." Back at the cabin, Ryan approached Max's corner slowly, setting down fresh water. "You've got to drink, buddy." The dog watched, unmoving. Sighing, Ryan sat cross-legged 6 feet away, deliberately averting his eyes, a non-threatening posture. He began cleaning his service pistol, movements automatic after thousands of repetitions. Condition 1, safety on, he murmured to himself, hands moving through the familiar ritual. From the corner came a subtle shift. Max's good ear pricked forward. Ryan glanced over, repeated more clearly. Condition 1. The dog's posture changed subtly, still afraid, but something else now. Recognition. Ryan tried another phrase from training. Stand ready. Despite his injuries, Max's muscles tensed in response, though he didn't rise. Well, I'll be damned, Ryan whispered. You're military, aren't you, boy? For the first time since finding him, Ryan saw something beyond fear in Max's remaining good eye, a flicker of what might have been recognition between two soldiers far from home. Christmas morning arrived with brittle sunlight and -15 temperatures. Ryan woke stiff from another night on the floor near Max's corner. The dog hadn't touched food or water in 36 hours. A timeline Emily had warned was critical. Ryan's phone rang as he was heating water for coffee. I got partial information from the chip, Emily said, skipping pleasantries. His registered name was Ranger. He was part of a military working dog program based out of Fort McCoy. Ryan's hand tightened on the phone. Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, less than 4 hours south. There's more, Emily continued. He failed final certification. Notes indicate excessive empathy and insufficient aggression profile. He was sold to civilian contractor Frank Thompson in Milwaukee 16 months ago. Excessive empathy, Ryan repeated. The military had deemed the dog too compassionate to be an effective weapon, then sold him to someone who'd punished that compassion systematically. Military dogs are supposed to go through proper adoption channels, Emily said. This sale shouldn't have happened. After hanging up, Ryan sat on the floor 10 feet from Max's corner. So we're both Rangers, he said quietly. Both didn't quite fit what they wanted. The ambush that ended Ryan's career had happened because he'd questioned a direct order. Refused to fire on a compound when their intelligence about combatant presence hadn't matched what he observed. His hesitation cost 4 men their lives, though later investigation proved children had indeed been present. The military cleared him officially, but the whispers remained. Mitchell lacks necessary decisiveness. Too much empathy for this line of work. Ryan filled a shallow bowl with water, placed it halfway between them, then retreated. Your choice, Ranger, he said, using the dog's original name for the first time. Minutes stretched into an hour. Finally, ribs protruding with each movement, the German shepherd crept forward. He drank cautiously, good eye never leaving Ryan, then retreated to his corner, a small victory that felt monumental. 2 days later, as Ryan changed Max's bandages, he noticed the telltale heat and swelling of infection. The dog's temperature had spiked to 104, dangerously high. When he called Emily, the clinic's receptionist answered instead. Dr. Wilson's trapped in Ashland until the plows come through. Highways closed from the new storm front. Ryan hung up and assessed his options with military precision. The infection would spread without antibiotics. The nearest emergency vet was in Hayward, 40 miles of unplowed roads away. Survival calculations, negative. He retrieved his field medical kit from under the bed, untouched since Afghanistan. Inside, combat gauze, suture kits, battlefield antibiotics with expired dates. Better than nothing. This is going to hurt, Ryan told Max, approaching with determined calm. But I need you to trust me. For the first time, he touched Max directly, without the dog flinching away. The infection site, A deep puncture wound Emily had cleaned and sutured needed to be reopened and drained. As Ryan worked, speaking in steady tones, Max remained unnaturally still, as if understanding the necessity of pain. A sharp knock interrupted Ryan's concentration. Margaret Sullivan stood on his porch, arms laden with supplies, snowshoes strapped to her boots. "Walked over from the county road," she explained. "My Herbert had MRSA last year. Thought these might help your situation." She handed Ryan a prescription bottle of powerful antibiotics. "How did you—" "Small towns," Margaret said simply. "We hear things. Herbert passed in March. Won't need these anymore." While Margaret brewed tea in the kitchen, Ryan administered the medication. Max's body trembled with fever, head resting limply against Ryan's thigh. The first voluntary contact he'd initiated. "You were a nurse," Ryan observed when Margaret returned. "Not just in Vietnam, after too." Margaret smiled slightly. "ICU for 30 years. Recognize the way you handle those bandages, son. You've had medical training." "Combat medic certification after we lost our unit's medic in Kandahar." They sat in understanding silence until Margaret prepared to leave. At the door, she touched Ryan's arm lightly. "That dog chose to trust you when he had every reason not to. Means something." That night, as Max's fever raged, Ryan found himself talking more than he had in years. He told Max about the ambush, about the 4 men who never came home, about waking up in Germany with half his face reconstructed and medals he didn't want. The dog listened, eyes reflecting firelight. "We both got screwed by the system, didn't we?" Ryan said, gently bathing Max's overheated body with cool cloths. "Both trained to do a job, then thrown away when we couldn't do it the way they wanted." When Max whimpered in pain, Ryan broke protocol and moved closer, letting the dog rest against him through the worst of the fever. By morning, the infection had broken. Max accepted food directly from Ryan's hand for the first time. 3 days later, Sheriff Calloway's cruiser crunched up the driveway. The sheriff carried a manila folder and a troubled expression. "Found some information on your dog's previous owner," he said, settling at the kitchen table. "Frank Thompson. 3 complaints of animal abuse dismissed for insufficient evidence. Works construction in Milwaukee, but has a hunting cabin near Weber Lake." He spread photographs across the table, social media screenshots showing a man in his 40s with a crew cut and cold eyes. In one, he stood over a cowering German shepherd, unmistakably Max, with what appeared to be a belt in his raised hand. "Found these on a private account. Not enough for charges without context, but thought you should know what you're dealing with." Ryan studied the images, committing Thompson's face to memory. "What happens if he wants the dog back?" Sheriff Calloway sighed. "Legally, he's still the owner unless you can prove abandonment or abuse. Burden of proof's high. And even if we pursue charges, jurisdiction's complicated since the abuse likely occurred in Sawyer County, not here." After the sheriff left, Ryan searched online for information about Frank Thompson. What he found made his blood run cold. Thompson had posted in private groups about military-grade training methods and breaking stubborn animals. That evening, Emily arrived to check Max's recovery. Her normally professional demeanor faltered when she saw the progress. Max now slept on a proper dog bed near the couch, though he still startled at sudden movements. "I've never seen recovery like this in an abuse case," she admitted, examining the healing wounds. "He trusts you." "He doesn't have much choice," Ryan said. Emily's expression hardened. "I should tell you, I've reported Frank Thompson before. Last year, another dog with similar injuries. Case was dismissed when the dog disappeared before evidence could be documented." "Disappeared?" Thompson claimed it ran away. Emily's voice turned clinical, but her hands trembled slightly. The investigating officer was his hunting buddy. Ryan processed this information with cold clarity. "I'm keeping Max," he decided. "Whatever it takes." "It won't be easy," Emily warned. "Thompson has resources and connections." "So did the Taliban," Ryan replied evenly. "I'm filing adoption papers tomorrow." The look that passed between them carried understanding of the battle ahead and the certainty that neither would back down. January brought relentless cold and a tentative new normal. 2 weeks after Ryan found Max half dead in the snow, the physical wounds had begun to heal. The psychological ones remained raw. Each morning, Ryan maintained the same routine: wake at 0600, coffee, gentle words before approaching Max's bed. Consistency, the military had taught him, creates security. Max still cowered at sudden movements. Certain triggers, the metallic clink of Ryan's belt buckle, the particular cadence of boots on hardwood, would send him retreating to his safe corner, trembling. But other signs showed progress. Max now followed Ryan from room to room, maintaining exactly 12 feet of distance. He ate regularly. His fur had begun to regain luster where it wasn't interrupted by healing wounds or old scars. Ryan found himself speaking more in these 2 weeks than he had in the previous year, mostly instructions and reassurances to Max, but words nonetheless. "Nobody's going to hurt you here," he would say, sitting on the floor with a book, pretending to read while actually watching Max's responses. "This is your home now, if you want it." The word home stirred something in Ryan's memory. His father's slurred voice, the crack of a beer bottle against the kitchen counter. "This is my home, boy. You follow my rules under my roof." The belt coming off, his mother's averted eyes. Ryan blinked the memory away, surprised. He hadn't thought of his childhood in years, had sealed it behind the more immediate traumas of Afghanistan. Max watched him with that penetrating gaze that suggested understanding beyond language. On January 2nd, Ryan ventured into Pinewood for supplies. The town had transformed into 2 camps, those bringing donations for "that poor, abused dog," and others muttering about dangerous animals and outsiders causing trouble. At Margaret's store, he overheard Pastor Williams from First Lutheran Church. "Military dogs are trained to kill. Mitchell's a recluse with clear issues. What happens when that animal snaps? Children walk those roads." Margaret's reply carried clearly down the aisle. "James Williams, you've known me 40 years. Ever known me to suffer foolishness?" A pause. "That man's healing something broken, doing the Lord's work in his way. Now you buying that cornmeal or just warming my store with hot air?" Ryan slipped out before confrontation became necessary. Back at the cabin, he found Max had moved his blanket from the dog bed to the rug beside Ryan's armchair, the first independent decision he'd made about his own comfort. "Progress," Ryan murmured, careful not to make the moment bigger than Max could handle. By January 5th, Max had begun responding to basic commands: sit, stay, come, though Ryan noticed he performed them with mechanical precision rather than enthusiasm. Military training lingered in muscle memory. That evening, Ryan introduced a tennis ball, rolling it gently across the floor. Max watched with confusion. "It's okay to play," Ryan explained, feeling foolish for expecting the dog to understand. "Nobody's testing you." Thunder rumbled in the distance, unusual for January. Max's reaction was immediate: rigid posture, dilated pupils, shallow breathing. Before Ryan could move, the dog bolted under the desk in the corner. The first thunderclap hit like artillery fire. Ryan's own heart rate spiked, sweat beading along his hairline. For a moment, he wasn't in Wisconsin, but back in the mountains. Incoming fire, radio static, Johnston screaming for backup. His hands trembled. Breathe through it. Count backward from 20. Identify 5 things you can see. The storm intensified. Ryan forced himself to move, sitting on the floor near Max's hiding place without blocking his exit. "We're a pair, aren't we?" he said softly, both jumping at shadows. As lightning illuminated the cabin in harsh bursts, Ryan began talking. Not to Max, but to himself, a technique his mandatory VA therapy had suggested. He described the cabin, the storm, the present moment in explicit detail to ground himself in reality rather than memory. Halfway through the storm, he felt pressure against his leg. Max had inched closer and was now leaning his body against Ryan's thigh, still trembling but seeking rather than avoiding contact. Neither moved for the next hour, as thunder rolled over the forest. When silence finally returned, Ryan realized his hands had stopped shaking. "Thank you," he whispered, not entirely sure what he was thanking the dog for. That night, Ryan called Dylan Reeves, a former ranger who worked with service dogs for veterans in Minneapolis. "You're describing classic trauma behavior," Dylan confirmed. "Military working dogs that wash out can struggle with civilian life, especially if they've faced abuse afterward. Kind of like us, man." "How do I help him?" "Same way we help each other. Patience, structure, showing him the world's not all combat and pain." Dylan paused. "Might help you both, actually." Ryan wanted to dismiss the suggestion, but couldn't. His nightstand drawer contained orange prescription bottles he'd stopped refilling, VA appointments he'd canceled. The isolation that had seemed like protection now felt like another kind of prison. "My disability payment's delayed again," Ryan said instead. "Vet bills are piling up." "Bureaucratic bullshit never changes," Dylan commiserated. "Listen, I know some people who might help with specialized food and medication. Let me make some calls." Financial reality was becoming pressing. Emily had worked out a payment plan, but Max needed follow-up surgery to remove bone fragments from his previously broken ribs. Ryan had started selling non-essential possessions online. His grandfather's fishing gear, his own custom hunting rifle, books he'd accumulated during recovery. On January 7th, Emily began making regular house calls to check Max's progress, waiving her travel fee. Ryan noticed Max responded differently to her than to Margaret. He remained cautious but didn't retreat when Emily approached. With Margaret, he still hid. "He's associating women with different experiences," Emily explained, gently examining Max's healing eye. "I'm clinical. Maybe reminds him of military veterinarians. Margaret might trigger other associations." "Perceptive little guy," Ryan observed. Emily's smile transformed her typically professional expression. "Animals read intention better than most humans." She glanced at Ryan. "He's lucky you found him." "Other way around," Ryan said without thinking. Their interactions had begun carrying an undercurrent of something neither acknowledged. Emily would bring coffee and sit at his kitchen table discussing Max's progress long after the medical necessity had passed. Ryan found himself cleaning the cabin before her visits, shaving more regularly. January 10th marked the first night Ryan woke to Max's nightmare. The dog's muffled whimpers escalated to thrashing, legs running against invisible threats, teeth snapping at the air. When Ryan approached, speaking softly, Max woke with a growl that dissolved into recognition. "I get them too," Ryan told him, sitting on the floor beside the dog bed. "Not your fault." Ryan's own nightmares had actually decreased since Max's arrival. The hypervigilance that had kept him checking locks 3 times nightly now had purpose, protection rather than paranoia. He slept longer, though still lightly. That afternoon, searching for extra blankets in the attic, Ryan discovered a wooden trunk containing his grandfather's journals from after Vietnam. William Mitchell had served as a handler in the K-9 Corps, returning home with invisible wounds in 1972. The leather-bound books detailed his struggle and eventual healing through working with former military dogs. "Found dogs nobody wanted," one entry read. "One's too damaged for families, too broken for service. Figured we understood each other. Sometimes the only one who gets what war does to you is someone else who's been in the fight." Ryan brought the journals downstairs, reading entries aloud to Max, who listened with pricked ears. The parallel was too precise to be coincidence. His grandfather's cabin, his grandfather's path, now unfolding again a generation later. When Margaret delivered supplies the next day, Ryan mentioned the journals. "Oh, Bill's dog work," she nodded, settling into a kitchen chair with familiar ease. "That's how I met him. I was a combat nurse in Nam before transferring to Walter Reed. Treated your grandfather when he came back with shrapnel in his shoulder. Later ran into him at the VA where he was bringing those dogs to visit patients." "You knew my grandfather that well?" Ryan was stunned. His mother rarely spoke of her father. Margaret's weathered hands wrapped around her coffee mug. "Knew him 40 years. He helped a lot of men heal after that war. The dogs, too." She glanced toward the living room where Max dozed. "You've got his touch with the broken ones." "I'm pretty broken myself," Ryan admitted. "That's why it works." Margaret's matter-of-factness left no room for self-pity. Wounded recognize wounded, create safety together. With newfound purpose, Ryan began taking Max to isolated forest clearings for rehabilitation exercises. January sunlight filtered through bare trees as they worked on basic commands, gradually introducing stimuli that triggered fear: metal objects, raised voices, sudden movements, paired with positive reinforcement. Max's intelligence became increasingly evident. He needed to be shown things only once. On a particularly cold morning, Ryan spotted tire tracks on the rarely used fire road leading toward his property. Someone had driven past, stopped, turned around. Unease settled between his shoulder blades, combat instincts awakening. He began varying his routines, watching for unfamiliar vehicles in Pinewood. His vigilance proved warranted. On January 15th, Sheriff Calloway delivered a certified letter, legal notice claiming Max as stolen property and demanding his immediate return to Frank Thompson. The document cited Max's significant value as a specially trained animal, threatening criminal charges if Ryan failed to comply within 5 business days. "He's getting support from some hunting club buddies," Sheriff Calloway explained grimly. "Claims you stole a valuable hunting dog worth $15,000. "Max was beaten nearly to death," Ryan said, rage simmering beneath his controlled exterior. "You saw the photos. I know what I saw, but Thompson's claiming those injuries happened after the dog supposedly ran away. Says you found him and kept him deliberately." The sheriff's expression revealed his skepticism. "He's got connections with Judge Harmon." Ryan's military mind calculated options. None good. His finances couldn't support extended legal battle. Wisconsin law still classified dogs primarily as property, with animal cruelty difficult to prove without direct evidence or witnesses. "What would you do?" Ryan asked finally. Sheriff Calloway removed his hat, ran a hand through thinning hair. "Officially, I'd tell you to comply with the legal notice." He paused, meaningfully. "Unofficially, I'd mention how easy it is to get lost in the Northwoods. Lots of folks head up to Canada this time of year. Running wasn't viable. Ryan's disability payments required a registered address, and Max needed ongoing medical care. Before he could formulate a response, his phone rang. Emily, calling from her clinic. "I just heard about Thompson's legal notice," she said without preamble. "I'm organizing a community fundraiser for legal expenses. The Timberwolf Cafe is hosting Saturday night." "Emily, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." Her voice hardened. "Frank Thompson has terrorized animals in 3 counties for years. Nobody stops him because he knows judges and police chiefs. This ends now." Ryan was struck by the vehemence in her typically measured tone. "You sound like this is personal." A long silence stretched across the line. Finally, Emily spoke, voice barely audible. "I need to tell you something. In person. Can you come to the clinic after hours?" That evening, Ryan left Max with Margaret and drove through light snowfall to Pinewood Veterinary Clinic. Emily was waiting alone, the professional demeanor entirely absent. She looked smaller somehow, shoulders hunched in an oversized sweater, eyes reddened. "Frank Thompson is my brother," she said without preamble. Ryan went completely still, the way he'd been trained to respond to unexpected enemy contact. "Your brother? Half-brother? Same mother, different fathers?" "I changed my name after veterinary school." Emily paced the small office. "I've been tracking his animal abuse for years, trying to build enough evidence for charges that would stick. That's why I came back to Pinewood after Chicago." "Does he know you're doing this?" "He suspects. We haven't spoken directly in 3 years, but he knows I've reported him before." Emily stopped pacing, met Ryan's eyes directly. "The previous dog that disappeared, the one I mentioned? I took him, relocated him to a sanctuary in Minnesota. Frank couldn't prove anything." The implications unfolded in Ryan's mind. "You've been gathering evidence against your own brother." "Our stepfather beat our dog to death when Frank was 14 and I was 9. Made us watch." Emily's clinical tone couldn't mask the old pain. "Something broke in Frank that day. He started hurting animals himself a few years later. I went the opposite direction." Ryan processed this revelation, connecting pieces. "The fundraiser isn't just about Max. It's about stopping Frank permanently." Emily's expression hardened. "I have documentation on 5 other cases. With Max's evidence and enough community support to counter Frank's connections, we might finally have enough." "Why tell me this now?" "Because you deserve to know what you're walking into. Frank won't just try to take Max legally, he'll make this ugly. He'll investigate you, use your military record, your isolation, anything he can find to paint you as unstable." Emily stepped closer. "And because I needed you to hear it from me, not him, he'll use our connection to try to turn you against me." Ryan had faced Taliban ambushes with less trepidation than he felt now. This wasn't combat. It was emotional terrain he'd avoided for years. Trust, vulnerability, connection. The military had clear protocols for enemy engagement. Human relationships did not. "I'm not easy to turn," he said finally. Relief softened Emily's features. "The fundraiser's already gathering support. Sheriff Calloway's wife is bringing her church group. Margaret's handling food. Even Pastor Williams is reconsidering his position." As Ryan drove home through thickening snow, he realized his isolation had been quietly breached. People he barely knew were rallying around him and Max, not out of duty or obligation, but choice. The realization was as unsettling as it was warming. Max greeted him at the door with newfound confidence, good eye bright with recognition, tail offering a tentative wag. For the first time, Ryan didn't see just the trauma they shared, but the possibility beyond it. His grandfather's legacy continuing through unexpected means. "We've got a fight ahead," he told Max, crouching to the dog's level. "But we're not doing it alone." January 20th arrived with bitter cold and crystalline skies. 5 days since Frank Thompson's legal notice, 1 day before the response deadline. Ryan spent the morning splitting firewood, each stroke of the axe precise and controlled, working through the strategies Dylan had suggested for managing pre-combat anxiety. Max watched from the porch, his posture now more alert than fearful, though the healed wounds remained visible beneath his thickening winter coat. The fundraiser at Timber Wolf Cafe had raised $4,000, impressive for Pinewood, but insufficient for extended legal battle. Still, Emily had secured a consultation with an animal rights attorney in Duluth. Sheriff Calloway quietly provided documentation of Frank's previous complaints. Margaret organized a letter-writing campaign to county officials. For the first time in years, Ryan felt the unfamiliar weight of community support. The sound of an approaching vehicle broke the stillness, tires crunching on the frozen driveway, engine louder than necessary. Ryan set down the axe and whistled softly. Max retreated inside through the dog door as trained, a precaution Ryan had established after spotting those mysterious tire tracks. A black Ford F-350 with Milwaukee plates pulled up. The man who emerged matched the photos Sheriff Calloway had shown. Frank Thompson, mid-40s, military-style crew cut, expensive winter gear. His face held the particular hardness Ryan recognized from certain officers. Men who enjoyed their authority without earning respect. "Mitchell," Thompson approached with calculated confidence. "Let's make this simple. I want my dog back." Ryan remained by the woodpile, maintaining tactical advantage. "Your dog nearly died from systematic abuse. That's documented." Thompson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Unfortunate accident. He slipped his chain during a training session. Got torn up by something in the woods before you found him. Medical evidence says otherwise." "Medical evidence from my sister?" Thompson's smile widened. Emily always had a soft spot for strays, human or animal. Ryan kept his expression neutral despite the confirmation of Emily's revelation. State law allows emergency custody of abused animals. That law requires proof. My word against yours. A reclusive vet with documented PTSD. My attorney's already speaking with the county prosecutor. Thompson gestured toward the cabin. "We can do this civilly. I've got the paperwork in my truck. Or we can escalate." Ryan had faced enough threats to recognize the difference between posturing and genuine danger. Thompson was both, a bully accustomed to intimidation working, but with real capacity for violence beneath. "Why do you want him back?" Ryan asked. "You've got other dogs. Max failed your training. What's he worth to you?" Something flickered across Thompson's face. Surprise at the name, perhaps, or at Ryan's direct questioning. "Ranger cost me $15,000. Military-grade Belgian Malinois and German Shepherd Cross. Specialized training foundation. I've got breeding rights and contracts." "He's been neutered," Ryan stated flatly. Emily's recommendation given the injuries to his hindquarters. Thompson's calculated demeanor slipped, revealing raw anger. "You had no right. Neither did you. To hurt him systematically. To try cutting out his microchip, to leave him to die in a blizzard. You don't understand training working dogs. Sometimes they need—" "I understand exactly what you did." Ryan's voice remained measured. "I've seen the same techniques used in interrogations overseas. They're called torture, when applied to humans. Thompson studied Ryan more carefully. Afghanistan, right? Army Rangers. I've got contacts at Fort McCoy who filled me in. You're the one who hesitated, got your squad killed. He smiled thinly. My father mentioned that case. General James Thompson. He authorized that operation. The connection struck Ryan like physical impact. General Thompson, the commander who'd pushed for the high-risk mission despite questionable intelligence, who'd afterward implied Ryan's hesitation caused the casualties rather than flawed planning, the man whose political connections had buried the subsequent investigation. Your father, Ryan repeated, newfound understanding crystallizing. The military connection. That's how you got access to wash out working dogs. Dad made sure I got first pick, Thompson confirmed, seeming pleased by Ryan's recognition. He understood proper discipline, proper consequences, things this weak generation has forgotten. Ryan watched Frank's posture, the way his right hand kept brushing his jacket pocket. Like beating dogs when they show compassion? Like what your stepfather did to your childhood pet? Thompson's expression froze. Emily's been running her mouth. Typical. She never understood what that experience taught us. Taught you what? That hurting the vulnerable feels like control when you have none? That weakness gets punished. Thompson's voice hardened. My stepfather was right about one thing. You either become the one giving pain or the one taking it. I made my choice early. Inside the cabin, Max had begun barking, sharp, alert sounds rather than fearful ones. Ryan kept his focus entirely on Thompson, whose right hand was now clearly reaching for something. Here's what happens now, Thompson said. You'll sign these transfer papers. I'll take the dog. You'll forget this happened. Or, Thompson withdrew not paperwork but a compact handgun. Or I'll shoot you for threatening me on my property. Your property? Ryan kept his voice level, mind calculating distances, angles. This cabin and land. County records show it belongs to William Mitchell's estate. I filed adverse possession paperwork this morning based on tax delinquency. My attorney expedited it. Thompson's smile returned. It's mine now. You're trespassing. The lie was transparent. Ryan had paid the property taxes meticulously. But Thompson clearly believed legal manipulation would work as it had before. The gun, however, changed everything. Lower the weapon, Ryan said quietly. You don't want to add armed assault to animal cruelty charges. No witnesses out here. Thompson raised the gun higher. Call the dog. Now. The cabin door burst open. Max appeared, hackles raised, a deep growl emanating from his chest. Thompson swung the weapon toward him instinctively. What happened next occurred in combat time, moments stretching and compressing simultaneously. Max launched himself toward Thompson despite months of abuse, conditioning him to cower from this man. Ryan moved in the same instant, leveraging his position to close the distance before Thompson could steady his aim. The gun discharged, the sound enormous in the winter stillness. Ryan executed a takedown he'd performed hundreds of times in training, controlling Thompson's weapon hand while using momentum to bring him to the ground. The gun skittered across ice-crusted snow. Thompson fought with untrained desperation. Ryan maintained positional control without striking, using only necessary force to immobilize. When Thompson was securely restrained, Ryan looked up. Max stood several feet away, blood darkening the snow beneath him. The bullet had caught him in the shoulder, but he remained standing, eyes fixed on Ryan as if awaiting further commands. "Max, stay!" Ryan ordered, voice breaking. The dog complied instantly, collapsing where he stood. Sheriff Calloway's cruiser arrived 9 minutes later, followed by Emily's clinic vehicle. While the sheriff secured a still struggling Thompson, Emily worked quickly to stabilize Max. GSW to right shoulder, significant blood loss, she reported clinically, though her hands trembled. Need to transport immediately. Ryan lifted Max's limp form, the dog's blood soaking his jacket. "Stay with me, buddy," he whispered. "Not like this. Not after everything." The next hours passed in fragmented clarity. Emily's clinic transformed into emergency surgery. Veterinary technicians summoned from neighboring towns. Sheriff Calloway taking Ryan's statement, photographing the scene. Thompson yelling from the cruiser's back seat about corrupt local justice and influential connections. "He claims you attacked him, forced him to defend himself," Sheriff Calloway explained. "Says the dog was trained to assault visitors." "That's not—" "I know." The sheriff held up a hand. "My dashboard cam caught his confession about filing false property claims, but he's demanding animal control evaluation of Max as a dangerous animal, if he survives." If he survives. The phrase echoed as Ryan watched through the clinic window, where Emily's team worked frantically. Blood-soaked gauze accumulated in a medical waste bin. Monitors beeped in irregular patterns. GSW penetrated the scapula, fragmented near the thoracic vertebrae, a consulting veterinarian explained hours later. "We've stabilized him, but he needs specialized surgery. Nearest facility is University of Minnesota Veterinary Medical Center in Minneapolis." "Whatever it takes," Ryan said automatically. "The transport and surgery will run approximately $9,000. With aftercare, I'll get it tonight." Back at the cabin, Ryan methodically inventoried his grandfather's remaining valuables, the vintage Rolex from his service days, the authenticated Civil War-era rifle passed down through generations, his grandmother's pearls. All told, perhaps $12,000 from a reputable dealer, if one could be found immediately. His phone rang. Margaret. "The news is reporting what happened," she said without preamble. "Some fool put it on that Facebook. Town's divided. Thompson's hunting friends are saying you trained that dog to attack. Pastor Williams is organizing a prayer vigil, though I can't tell which side he's praying for." Ryan barely registered her words, focused on the immediate problem. "Margaret, I need to sell some items quickly, for Max's surgery. Bring them to me. Herbert collected antique firearms. I know buyers." Emily called next. "The Minneapolis transport is arranged. But Ryan, the police have questions about Max's training. Thompson's claiming Max was specifically commanded to attack." "That's not what happened. Max was protecting—" "I know." Emily's exhaustion carried through the line. "But animal control has to evaluate him after treatment. If they determine he's dangerous, Wisconsin law is clear." The implication hung unspoken. Euthanasia. After everything, after surviving abuse and abandonment, Max could be killed by the very system meant to protect animals. By nightfall, local news vans had discovered Ryan's address. He avoided them, loading the valuable items into his truck. Margaret met him at the general store's back entrance, efficiently photographing and listing each piece on specialized collector websites. "The rifle alone should cover the surgery," she said, fingers typing rapidly. "My late Herbert knew a collector in Chicago who specializes in military memorabilia." Ryan nodded, numb with fatigue and worry. "I need to get back to the clinic." "One more thing." Margaret handed him a thick envelope. "From the fundraiser and additional donations since the news broke. Not enough for everything, but it helps." Inside was $7,240 in cash and checks, along with handwritten notes. "Prayers for Max's recovery. Thank you for protecting him. My brother came home from Iraq, I understand." Ryan stared at the unexpected support, something tight in his chest loosening fractionally. At the clinic, Emily had prepared Max for transport. The dog lay sedated on a stretcher, wrapped in thermal blankets, IV lines running into his foreleg. Despite the professional equipment, he looked impossibly fragile. "The surgical team is waiting in Minneapolis," Emily said. "I'll accompany him in the transport." Ryan stroked Max's head gently. "I'll follow in my truck." "Ryan," Emily hesitated. "The sheriff came by while you were gone. They've officially classified this as an assault case with pending investigation into Max's behavior. Frank's being charged with filing false documents and illegal discharge of a firearm, but he made bail already." The implications settled heavily. Even if Max survived physically, the legal system could still take him. And Frank Thompson, now facing actual consequences for perhaps the first time, would be motivated by revenge as much as property rights. "One battle at a time," Ryan said, military training asserting itself. "Identify the immediate objective. Execute. Move to next phase." As the specialized veterinary transport pulled away into the darkness, Ryan followed, the envelope of community donations secure in his jacket pocket. Ahead lay a 5-hour drive through midnight Wisconsin winter, an uncertain surgery, and legal battles beyond. But for the first time since Afghanistan, the mission parameters were absolutely clear. Max had risked everything to protect him. Ryan would do no less in return. January 23rd dawned gray and lifeless at the University of Minnesota Veterinary Medical Center. Ryan had spent the night in a molded plastic chair, waking every hour to check on Max through the ICU observation window. The specialized surgery had removed bullet fragments from near Max's spine, but post-operative complications emerged overnight. Infection setting in despite antibiotics, blood pressure dropping, temperature spiking. "We're seeing septicemia," the lead veterinarian, Dr. Abrams, explained during morning rounds. His system was already compromised from previous injuries and malnutrition. His body doesn't have the reserves to fight this. Emily, who had remained in Minneapolis rather than returning to her clinic, translated the clinical terms. "Blood infection, dangerous in any patient, but especially one with Max's history." Ryan processed this information with outward calm that belied his internal turmoil. "Options? Aggressive antibiotic protocol, supportive care, possibly dialysis if his kidneys show further stress." Dr. Abrams hesitated. "I should mention that given his condition and the pending dangerous animal investigation, some owners might consider humane euthanasia." "Not an option," Ryan said flatly. Dr. Abrams nodded. "Then we fight. But prepare yourself. The next 24 hours are critical." Throughout the day, Ryan maintained his position near Max's kennel, moving only when staff needed access. The German shepherd lay unnaturally still, monitors tracking his struggling vital signs. Occasionally, his good eye would flutter open, focusing briefly on Ryan before sliding closed again. Emily worked alongside the hospital staff, her veterinary credentials granting her limited privileges. She pushed boundaries, suggesting alternative treatments, consulting with specialists across the country. Her professional demeanor cracked only once when leaving Max's ICU unit after a particularly concerning drop in oxygen levels. "I can't lose him too," she whispered, so quietly Ryan almost missed it. As evening settled over Minneapolis, snow began falling in thick, lazy flakes. Ryan watched through the hospital windows, remembering another snowy night in Afghanistan's mountains. The mission that went sideways. Staff Sergeant Miller's voice on the radio, growing weaker as blood loss took its toll. "Leave me, Mitchell. Get the others out." The impossible choice. Stay with the dying or lead the living to safety. We lost him. Dr. Abrams's voice pulled Ryan back to the present. For a horrific moment, he thought the doctor meant Max. The infection specialist I wanted to consult. Snowstorms grounded flights from Chicago. That night, Ryan was permitted to stay in Max's ICU cubicle. He sat on the floor beside the hospital kennel, one hand through the bars resting gently on Max's flank, feeling each labored breath. The monitoring equipment beeped in irregular rhythms. "You've got to fight," Ryan murmured. "I know it hurts. I know you're tired, but you've got more living to do." Max's eye opened briefly, recognition flickering. His tail thumped once against the kennel floor, a gesture that broke something open in Ryan's chest. Near dawn, on January 24th, alarms jarred Ryan from uneasy sleep. Max had stopped breathing. The emergency team rushed in, administering rescue medications, inserting a breathing tube. Ryan was ushered into the hallway, where he stood rigidly watching through glass as they fought to restart Max's respiratory system. Emily found him there, her scrubs rumpled from overnight work. "He's still with us," she said, voice raw. "But Ryan—" She hesitated. "This pattern will continue unless something changes fundamentally in his treatment." "What do we need? Different specialists, equipment? I'll get it." "It's not just medical resources." Emily's professional distance fell away entirely. "You've been fighting this battle alone since you got home from Afghanistan, living like a ghost. Max does the same thing. Retreats, survives, but doesn't connect." Ryan stiffened. "This isn't about me." "It is. Animals sense everything. Fear, grief, isolation. You two mirror each other." Emily's exhaustion made her brutally direct. "You're both fighting the same battle, and if he's going to survive this, he needs more than medicine. He needs to believe there's something beyond survival worth fighting for." The truth of her words struck with precision. Ryan had been existing, not living, maintaining his isolation like a protective barrier, the same way Max had retreated to his corner when first rescued. When the crisis stabilized, Ryan stepped outside the hospital to make a call he'd avoided for 3 years. His mother answered on the 4th ring. "Ryan?" Her voice carried surprise and trepidation. "Is everything all right?" "No," he admitted. "I need to talk. About Grandpa. About everything." The conversation lasted 47 minutes, halting at first, then flowing more freely. Years of misunderstandings began unraveling. His mother had avoided him after Afghanistan, not from disappointment, but from fear of saying the wrong thing, of failing him as she felt she'd failed his father's PTSD decades earlier. "I thought you'd be better without the reminder," she explained. "Your father never recovered. I was afraid—" "That I'd become him," Ryan finished. "I should have been there. I was wrong." When Ryan returned to Max's room, a nurse was adjusting medication. "Your friend asked me to give you this." She handed him a folded newspaper. The headline froze his blood. "Dangerous military dog attacks owner, questions about handler's PTSD." The article quoted Frank Thompson's attorney claiming Max had been specifically trained to attack visitors and that Ryan had used military conditioning techniques to weaponize an already dangerous animal. It referenced Ryan's military history and isolated lifestyle as concerning factors in the case. No mention of Thompson's abuse or false property claims. Emily arrived shortly after, face tight with anger. "Frank's lawyer is running a media campaign. He's got the hunting associations and some veterans groups believing his version. Thompson has influence. More than we realized." Emily lowered her voice. Sheriff Calloway called. While executing the search warrant on Frank's property, they found evidence connecting him to an underground dog fighting ring. Training materials, specialized equipment, ledgers with substantial cash transactions. Ryan's mind made immediate connections. The hunting dogs, the injuries consistent with fighting, the need to reclaim Max despite his failure at training. Exactly. Frank wasn't just abusing animals, he was training and selling them as fighting dogs. Max was probably being punished for refusing to show necessary aggression. Before Ryan could process this revelation, alarms sounded again from Max's monitors. This time, the crisis didn't resolve quickly. Medical staff worked for nearly an hour, stabilizing his condition. "We've done everything medically possible," Dr. Abrams said afterward. "His body is shutting down systematically. I recommend you prepare yourself." January 25th brought heavy snowfall and a sense of impending loss. Max's condition deteriorated hourly. He no longer opened his eyes or responded to Ryan's voice. The monitors told the story his failing body couldn't, organs shutting down, infection winning despite aggressive intervention. Emily entered with uncharacteristic gentleness. "Ryan, the team needs to perform some procedures. You should take a break." "I'm not leaving him." "Please." Her voice broke. "Just for an hour. Go get some air." Something in her tone made Ryan comply. He wandered outside into the blizzard, snow immediately coating his shoulders and hair. He walked blindly, grief cracking open the compartments where he'd stored previous losses. Teammates, friends, his grandfather, his own former self. A car pulled alongside. Margaret Sullivan leaned across to open the passenger door. "Get in before you freeze, son." "How did you—" Emily called. "I was already halfway here." Margaret's practical tone belied the concern in her eyes. "She thought you might need someone who understands." They sat in her idling car, windshield wipers fighting the falling snow. Ryan's control finally shattered, grief pouring out in ragged breaths. Margaret waited, then spoke with the directness of her generation. "Sometimes the bravest thing isn't surviving. It's allowing yourself to love again, knowing you might lose it." Ryan looked at her, this woman who'd loved and lost a husband, who'd witnessed the worst of what humans do to each other in war, who still opened her store every morning at 6. "How?" he asked simply. "By remembering that grief is just love with nowhere to go." She squeezed his hand. "Now let's get back to that dog of yours. He's not done fighting yet." January 26th arrived with unexpected silence. The alarms that had punctuated Ryan's vigil for days had stopped. He returned to the veterinary hospital from Margaret's nearby hotel room, steeling himself for the worst. The ICU hallway stretched before him, each step heavier than his combat gear had ever felt. Emily met him outside Max's room, dark circles beneath her eyes, but something different in her expression. "He's stabilized," she said, voice rough from exhaustion. "His fever broke around 3 a.m. Infection markers are decreasing." Ryan stared at her, afraid to accept what she was saying. "Yesterday you told me to prepare." "I know." Emily guided him to the observation window. Inside, Max lay still, connected to monitors, but his breathing had changed, deeper, more regular. "After you left, I tried something unconventional, an experimental treatment protocol my brother was researching before everything happened." "Your brother researched veterinary medicine?" "Frank was brilliant once," Emily said quietly. "Biochemistry degree from Madison. He developed an immunotherapy approach for canines with compromised systems. The university rejected it as too experimental, but I kept his research." Her eyes remained on Max. "When the standard protocols weren't working, I contacted Dr. Abrams. He agreed to try it as compassionate use." Ryan watched Max's chest rise and fall with newfound steadiness. Why would Frank research treatments to help dogs when he— That's the tragedy. He loved animals deeply as a child. Emily's voice carried decades of grief. Our stepfather didn't just kill our dog. He made Frank watch, told him it was his fault for being too attached, said he needed to learn that weakness gets punished. Jesus! Frank was 14, I was 9. After that, something changed in him. Like he decided if loving animals made him vulnerable, he'd master them instead. Control became his protection. Emily's clinical detachment slipped further. I went the opposite direction, tried to save them all. Probably why I became a vet. Through the window, Max's eye opened. He looked directly at Ryan, recognition evident. A weak thump of his tail against the bedding. The sheriff called again while you were gone, Emily continued. Frank's cooperating with authorities now. The evidence they found was substantial, not just the dog-fighting connection, but interstate trafficking, federal charges. In exchange for leniency, he's providing names, locations. Why the sudden cooperation? The article backfired. Several former clients recognized their hunting dogs in the description of Frank's operation. They've come forward with evidence. His lawyer advised cooperation as the only option. By afternoon, Max was responsive enough for Ryan to enter his room. The dog's tail wagged weakly but consistently as Ryan settled beside the hospital bed. Outside the window, Minneapolis continued digging out from the blizzard. "Local news wants to interview you," Margaret announced, entering with coffee. "The full story's breaking. Communities rallying now they understand what actually happened." "No interviews," Ryan said automatically. Margaret fixed him with a stern look. "Pride's a luxury, son. Max needs public support for the dangerous animal hearing. Sometimes the story needs telling." February 1st brought unexpected visitors to the veterinary hospital. Max had improved enough to begin physical therapy, though recovery would be lengthy. Ryan was helping him with gentle walking exercises when Sheriff Calloway arrived with a man in a formal military uniform. "Mitchell," the sheriff nodded. "This is Colonel James Brenner from Fort McCoy. He needs to speak with you about Max." The colonel extended his hand. "Sergeant Mitchell, your reputation precedes you." Ryan stiffened. "Sir." "At ease. I'm here about Ranger, or Max, as you've named him. Our investigation into Thompson's activities revealed something concerning. Several washout military working dogs that should have gone through proper adoption channels were diverted to private sales. Your dog was one of them." Colonel Brenner knelt beside Max, who sniffed his hand cautiously before allowing a gentle stroke. "I reviewed his training records. Exceptional intelligence, but failed final certification due to what our handlers called excessive empathy. He consistently broke training to check on handlers who feigned injury, prioritized assistance over attack commands. Too compassionate for war," Ryan translated. "For our purposes, yes. For civilian life, these are exactly the qualities we value." The colonel stood. "There's more. During the investigation, we found testimony that Max intervened when Thompson's nephew fell into a lake last summer. The boy would have drowned, but Max jumped in, pulled him to shore. Thompson beat the dog afterward for disobeying commands to stay." Ryan absorbed this information, the pieces aligning. Max's fear of water, the old rib fractures, the contradiction of his training responses, and his fearful behavior. "Your grandfather was a pioneer in our K-9 rehabilitation program after Vietnam," Colonel Brenner continued. "His methods are still taught at Fort McCoy. When we discovered his grandson had rescued one of our dogs," he smiled slightly, "let's call it providential. Sheriff Calloway cleared his throat. "What the colonel's saying is that the military has filed a formal reclamation request for Max, citing improper sale and Thompson's pending charges. Once approved, they can legally transfer ownership to you through their adoption program. Bypasses the dangerous animal hearing entirely. I've spent 30 years working with military dogs," Colonel Brenner added. "I'll testify to Max's temperament at any required hearings." What he did wasn't aggression. It was protective response consistent with his training. Exactly what we taught him to do. February 5th dawned clear and cold. Max had been cleared for discharge, though his recovery would continue for months. As Ryan completed paperwork, his phone rang, his mother again, calling daily now since their reconnection. "I've been cleaning out the attic," she said. "Found Dad's old training journals. Thought you might want them for Max's rehabilitation." "I'd like that," Ryan replied, the words coming easier than they would have weeks earlier. As he ended the call, a nurse delivered an envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from Frank Thompson, sent from county detention. "I don't expect forgiveness," the letter began. "What I did to those animals, to Max, was unforgivable. The psychiatrist here says I've been reenacting my stepfather's abuse, becoming what I feared. It sounds like psychobabble, but maybe he's right." The letter continued, formally relinquishing all claims to Max and apologizing specifically for the false media narrative. The signature was shaky, nothing like the confident man who'd confronted Ryan at the cabin. Emily arrived as Ryan finished reading. Veterans United called. They're covering all remaining medical expenses as part of their service dog support program. "We're not a charity case," Ryan objected. "No, you're their newest partner." Emily smiled, a real smile that transformed her typically reserved expression. "My clinic has been selected for an innovative PTSD service dog training program. They want Max as their ambassador once he's recovered, and they'd like you to help train veterans to work with the dogs." Ryan looked at her with dawning realization. "You applied for this grant before any of this happened." 6 months ago. Never expected to be approved." Emily's eyes shone with unexpected tears. "After what Frank and I experienced as children, I wanted to break the cycle, use animals to heal trauma instead of compounding it. Then you and Max appeared, as if the universe was confirming the path." Max watched them from his hospital bed, his good eye bright with improving health, his scarred body beginning the long journey toward wholeness. Like Ryan, he carried visible and invisible wounds that would never completely heal. But as Emily had said, perhaps their shared understanding was exactly what made healing possible. Outside, winter sunlight transformed Minneapolis into a glittering landscape of possibility. For the first time since Afghanistan, Ryan looked toward the future without dread. 3 months later, May sunshine streamed through newly installed windows in Ryan's cabin. The transformation wasn't just structural. Flowers planted by the Pinewood Garden Club bordered a fenced yard where Max ran with fluid grace, his coat glossy and full. The scars remained visible if you knew where to look, but no longer defined him. Inside, Ryan reviewed training protocols at the kitchen table, a gift from Sheriff Calloway's woodworking hobby. The cabin had become a gathering place during the community renovation effort, erasing years of isolation and weekends of shared labor, potluck meals, and genuine connection. "We've got 4 veterans starting next week," Emily said, sorting through applications. Their partnership with the PTSD Service Dog Program had launched successfully, with Max as the program's inspiration. 2 Afghanistan, 1 Iraq, 1 Vietnam. Ryan nodded, adding notes to the training schedule. The work suited him, structured enough to satisfy his military precision, meaningful enough to heal old wounds. His official title was Veteran Liaison, but he'd become much more, a bridge between the clinical aspects Emily managed and the unspoken understanding only another combat veteran could provide. Max's phone alert chimed, a specialized tone indicating his therapy vest should be donned. Ryan had scheduled twice-weekly visits to the VA hospital in Duluth, where Max's extraordinary empathy had become legendary among the staff. The dog who once cowered from human touch now intuited precisely which patients needed connection most, often settling beside those whose suffering remained outwardly invisible. "Mom called," Ryan mentioned as they prepared to leave. "She's arriving Thursday for the weekend." The relationship remained tentative but healing. Each conversation revealed missing pieces of their shared history: his grandfather's legacy, his father's struggles, the fear that had driven her distance after his injury. They arrived at the VA hospital as afternoon support group was beginning. Ryan's presentation had become a regular feature, his journey with Max offering tangible proof that moving forward was possible, without erasing the past. "The military trained us both for combat," Ryan explained to the circle of veterans. "Neither of us quite fit what they needed. Both of us carried that as failure." Max moved among the group, allowing gentle touches from those ready for connection, respectfully bypassing those who weren't. "But what the military considered our weakness became our strength in civilian life. Max's empathy, my caution, the very qualities that didn't serve in combat became essential for healing." A Vietnam veteran with trembling hands reached for Max, who placed his head gently on the man's knee. "How'd you know you could trust again?" the man asked, eyes fixed on the dog. "After everything." Ryan met Emily's gaze across the room. "I didn't. Max showed me how." Margaret Sullivan observed from the doorway, her practical nurse's assessment noting details others might miss: the straight posture that had replaced Ryan's combat-ready tension, the easy confidence in Max's movements, the silent communication between dog and handler that transcended training. "Those two saved each other," she commented as Emily joined her. "Your program just gave them the framework." "Sometimes that's enough," Emily replied. "Structure until healing creates its own foundation." The summer passed in steady rhythm. The cabin garden flourished. The training program expanded to neighboring counties. Emily's visits evolved from professional to personal until the distinction blurred entirely. Christmas Eve, 1 year after Max had nearly died in the snow, the cabin glowed with warmth and light. The dining table that had once held only Ryan's solitary meals now accommodated a gathering. Margaret, Sheriff Calloway and his wife, Colonel Brenner from Fort McCoy, Ryan's mother, several program graduates with their service dogs, and Emily, whose reserved professional demeanor had softened into something more vulnerable and real. Max greeted each arrival confidently, his therapy certification tags jingling against his collar. He showed particular attention to an elderly veteran who arrived with oxygen assistance, staying near him throughout the evening with intuitive understanding of his needs. As conversations flowed around him, Ryan watched the gathering with quiet amazement. His grandfather's journals lay open on the sideboard, a continuation rather than just a memory. Outside, snow fell in gentle confirmation that seasons change, that winter eventually yields. Later, after guests departed and Emily stayed behind, Ryan stood on the porch with Max beside him, surveying the peaceful landscape. "Sometimes it's not about who saved whom," Ryan reflected, his hand resting on Max's head. "It's about finding someone who makes the darkness a little less frightening." Max leaned against his leg in understanding. What this remarkable dog had done wasn't just survive. He had shown everyone, including Ryan, what courage truly looks like. The willingness to trust again after betrayal, to love after loss, to move forward while carrying the past with honor. In the end, that was the miracle that made everyone cry. In life's winter seasons, when isolation feels permanent, remember Ryan and Max's journey? Two wounded souls, one man haunted by battlefield memories, one dog bearing scars of cruelty, found healing in each other when the world had written them both off. Their story reminds us it's never too late for second chances. The cabin that once sheltered loneliness became a gathering place of laughter and purpose. The hands that once checked for weapons now reach out in friendship. The heart that closed to protect itself learned to trust again. This is the miracle waiting in life's third act, the discovery that our deepest wounds can become our greatest gifts to others. Our experiences, even painful ones, create unique wisdom only we can share. Max and Ryan found their calling together, proving that purpose doesn't diminish with age, it deepens, becoming more authentic and meaningful. Have you experienced an unexpected connection that changed your life's direction? What second chance are you grateful for today? Share your story in the comments below. Your journey might be exactly the hope someone else needs to hear today. Remember, courage isn't just surviving, it's daring to live fully again.